They expanded their garden onto my property, claiming, "It's just plants, you're being ridiculous." So I dug up every single one and left them wilting on their porch. The day they woke up to their crops drying out, they screamed, "How could you?" I never thought a simple garden could ignite such a fierce neighborhood dispute. When I moved into my modest home in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, I was drawn to the peaceful surroundings and friendly faces. Little did I know, tranquility would soon be disrupted by an overgrown tomato plant. It all began when I noticed my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, had extended her vegetable garden beyond her property line, encroaching several feet into my backyard. At first, I thought it was an innocent mistake. After all, gardening can be a passionate endeavor, and perhaps she hadn't realized the boundaries. I decided to address the issue diplomatically. One sunny afternoon, I walked over to her house and knocked on the door. Mrs. Henderson, a woman in her late 60s with a penchant for wide-brimmed hats and floral gloves, greeted me warmly. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Henderson," I began. "I couldn't help but notice that your garden has extended a bit into my yard. I was wondering if we could discuss the property lines and perhaps find a solution." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's just a few plants, dear. You're being ridiculous. It's not like I'm building a shed on your property." I was taken aback by her nonchalant attitude. "I understand that it's just plants, but it's still my property. I'd appreciate it if we could respect the boundaries." She sighed, clearly annoyed. "Fine. I'll see what I can do." Days turned into weeks and nothing changed. Her tomato plants, zucchini, and even a row of corn continued to thrive on my land. Frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. One early morning, before the sun had fully risen, I donned my gardening gloves and set to work. I carefully uprooted every single plant that had trespassed onto my property, ensuring I didn't damage them. Once I had gathered them all, I carried the wilted crops over to Mrs. Henderson's porch and laid them out neatly. The next morning, I was awakened by a shrill scream. Peering through my window, I saw Mrs. Henderson standing on her porch, staring in horror at the pile of withering plants. She marched over to my house and pounded on the door. "How could you?" she exclaimed when I opened the door. I remained calm. "Mrs. Henderson, I gave you ample time to address the situation. Since you didn't take action, I did. I made sure not to harm your plants. They're all there on your porch." Her face turned red with anger. "This is outrageous. You're overreacting." "I don't think expecting someone to respect property lines is overreacting," I replied firmly. She stormed off, muttering under her breath. From that day on, she kept her garden within her own yard. Our interactions became limited to curt nods and forced smiles, but at least my property was respected. A few days after the plant drop-off, I thought it was over. I figured Mrs. Henderson would take the hint, stay in her lane, and mind her vegetables. But I was wrong. So wrong. It started small. I noticed muddy footprints on my side of the fence. Not just near the line, all the way up to my shed. At first, I thought maybe a stray dog wandered through. I installed a small trail cam just to see if I was right. I wasn't. 2 days later, the footage came in, Mrs. Henderson, in her big sun hat, creeping around my yard at dusk. Not just walking, she was digging. Digging. Near my shed. Like she was looking for something or planting something. That alone would have been enough to go to the HOA or even the police. But I wanted to understand why. What the hell was she doing on my property again? So I waited. I didn't confront her. I let her think she'd won. Meanwhile, I checked that same camera every night. Over the next week, she kept coming back. Always around the same time, just before dark. And every time, she'd go to the same exact spot, about 3 feet from my shed, and dig with a hand spade, then cover it back up. So, I went out one night with a flashlight and a shovel. Dug the spot myself. What I found wasn't plants. It was trash. Old banana peels. Rotten tomatoes. Moldy cabbage. It reeked. She'd been composting on my property on purpose. This wasn't just a garden dispute anymore. This was war. I didn't say anything yet. I didn't want her to stop. I wanted more evidence. I got a second camera and aimed it higher to catch her face. The next day, I got home from work and walked out back. There was a dead squirrel on my porch. Just laying there. No blood. No trap nearby. Just a dead squirrel. I don't know for sure it was her, but I checked the footage that night and saw her walk past my gate around 4 p.m. holding something wrapped in a towel. She walked out empty-handed. I started documenting everything. Screenshots, videos, even timestamps. I wasn't planning to post it or go to the HOA anymore. I was saving up for something bigger. Around that same time, I noticed something else. Her garden started to look off. Her corn stalks were turning brown. Tomato vines were drooping. I didn't touch a thing. I swear. But it was like her plants were cursed. One evening I was out watering my own, now perfectly healthy, plants, and I saw her staring at me from her upstairs window. Just staring. Not moving. No blinds, no shame. It gave me chills. The next day, someone filed a noise complaint on me for aggressive lawn equipment use at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I hadn't used anything louder than a watering hose that day. It was her, of course, trying to escalate. But then, the twist. A new neighbor moved in 2 doors down. Young couple. Friendly. Let's call them Mike and Rita. After a few casual chats over the fence, Mike says, "Hey, did you see the weird lady trying to bless our yard with her garden clippings last night?" I raised an eyebrow. "What?" He laughed. "She said something about the soil being unclean and needing to be balanced. We told her to leave." I was stunned. She wasn't just messing with me. She was expanding her chaos. This woman truly believed she had some spiritual right to everyone's dirt. That changed everything. I wasn't just defending my yard anymore. I was dealing with someone on a mission. A mission to take over every backyard in the zip code. I knew then that this was far from over. After Mike told me about Mrs. Henderson's bizarre attempt to bless their soil, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started to wonder, was this just petty revenge, or was there something deeper going on with her? That's when I started digging into public records. Turns out, she'd lived in that house for nearly 30 years. Her late husband had passed about 5 years ago. He'd been a botanist, not some backyard hobbyist either. He'd worked at the Ohio State University greenhouse. There were a few local articles about his work with alternative soil treatments and compost experiments. Apparently, they'd once been kind of a big deal in niche gardening circles. And then he died. No one really knew why. No obituary, no funeral notice. Just a vague mention of a sudden illness in one article. That creeped me out more than I'd like to admit. But it explained a few things. Her obsession with the land. The rituals. The way she talked like the soil itself had feelings. Still, it didn't excuse what she was doing. A few nights later, I caught her again on my cam, only this time, she wasn't composting. She was burying glass jars. Little mason jars. With handwritten notes inside. I dug one up when she left. It read, "Let the rot return to them. Let the fruit dry. Let the roots betray the thief." What the hell? The next jar had some kind of dried herbs and a piece of hair inside. I know because I opened it and almost puked. At this point, I wasn't just annoyed. I was legit concerned. This was no longer about tomatoes. It was personal. It was creepy. I texted Mike. Asked if they'd seen her again. His reply, "She left a jar on our welcome mat." Rita's freaking out. WTH is wrong with her. That was it. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I printed out all the photos, the trail cam stills, the jars, the time-stamped footage, and went straight to the HOA board meeting that week. The president, this sharp older lady named Yvonne, didn't even let me finish my presentation before her eyes went wide. She tried something similar with me 2 years ago, Yvonne said, pointing at the screen. Said my begonias were disrupting her garden's aura. I ignored her. One of the other board members chimed in. She poured pickle juice on my lawn. Suddenly, everything clicked. She'd been slowly messing with everyone. One garden at a time. Like it was a mission. They agreed unanimously to issue a formal warning and start proceedings to restrict her gardening to her own property only. Finally, some backup. But the next morning, and I'm not making this up, every house on the block that had spoken out against her had a pile of mulch dumped on their lawn. Just a huge, wet, rotting mound of wood chips and soggy compost. Some of it smelled like ammonia and eggs. No trucks were seen. No doorbell cams caught anything. The HOA called it vandalism. I called it a message. Then came the letters. Handwritten notes slipped under our doors: respect the earth, or it will reclaim you. She signed them with a drawing of a root system. I started locking everything. Garage. Shed. Even the gate to the side yard. But one morning I came out and every single potted plant I owned, every last one, was tipped over. Dirt spilled. Ceramic cracked. My rosemary bush, which I'd been nursing for 2 years, was snapped at the stem. That was my line. I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't going to let this keep happening. I was done playing it nice. After the rosemary incident, I spent an entire weekend planning. Not to hurt her. Not to scare her. Just to end it, for good. I needed to show her that she'd pushed the wrong person too far. First, I called a friend of mine, Kyle. He works in land surveying and property disputes. I told him what was going on, showed him the photos, the videos, the mulch piles. He agreed to help, no charge. That Monday, Kyle came with all his gear. We walked my property line with stakes, neon tape, and GPS. It was clear as daylight. She was a full 4 feet over the line with her planting beds. Not just one bed. All of them. Then we did something bold. We marked the true line with fluorescent paint. It cut right through her prized vegetable rows. Right through the corn stalks. The peppers. The tangled beans. I knew she'd see it the second she stepped outside. And she did. She screamed so loud my dog barked from inside the house. She stormed over to me, shaking a plastic watering can. "What is this? What are you doing?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "That's my land. The truth's in the paint. I'm done playing games." "You're sick," she shouted, pointing. "This is nature. You can't own the earth. You can't trespass either," I snapped back. The HOA backed me. I sent them the updated survey report. I sent them the pictures, the jars, the trail cam clips. Yvonne even fast-tracked the restriction notice. It passed unanimously. That night, her garden lights went dark. 2 days later, I woke up to find her entire garden uprooted. All of it gone. Corn stalks dumped in trash bags. Tomato cages twisted and tossed. It looked like a storm hit. But no storm had come. I found her in the backyard, just sitting in a folding chair, staring at the torn-up soil. No hat. No gloves. Just silence. I didn't say anything. But I felt something weird. Not guilt. Not pity. Something like tiredness. Like I didn't even win anything. But the real end didn't come until a week later. I was on my porch when a sheriff's deputy pulled up. Turns out Mrs. Henderson had filed a harassment complaint. Claimed I was stalking her, destroying her garden, poisoning her soil. I had proof none of it was true, of course. But it shook me. Even after everything she did, she still tried to flip the script. The officer left after seeing the trail cam footage and Kyle's survey. But it made me realize something ugly. This had become an obsession. Not just for her. For me too. I had let her drag me into her crazy world of dirt and lines and grudges. I'd lost hours, weekends, sleep, peace. And then came the final twist. A city inspector showed up with a notice. My backyard was under review for possible zoning violations. Guess who filed the anonymous complaint? She was trying to use the city as her final weapon. But this time, she messed up. Because her complaint triggered a broader inspection, not just my yard, but hers too. Turns out, Mrs. Henderson had dozens of unpermitted structures buried in her yard. Old irrigation pipes. Broken concrete borders. Even an old compost bin that was illegally draining into the storm sewer. The fine? $3,700 and a court appearance. That was the last straw. She tried to fight it. But the city had pictures. Blueprints. Soil tests. She lost her appeal. And 2 weeks later, a "for sale" sign appeared in her front yard. The day she moved out, she didn't look at me. Didn't wave. Just got into a rusted Honda and drove off while the new owners, a young couple with a toddler, pulled up to meet the realtor. But here's the twist. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel like I'd won. Because even though I'd won the war, I'd become someone I didn't like. Angry, paranoid, petty. She was wrong, no doubt about that. But I had let her get inside my head. I'd spent more energy fighting her than enjoying my home. So yeah, I got my yard back. I got the last word. But I also learned the hard way, when you go to war over dirt, you always walk away a little dirty.